welcome to QTV, and you are watching the Week in Review, our weekly trawl through the big stories from the week. And as usual, going through the stories with me, I have friend and colleague, Mr. Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program.
Adi, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And of course, to you, the viewers, welcome. And also doing the signing for us, we have Lamin D. Sonko, who will be signing throughout the program. So what have we got on the menu today? Well, intermittent power cuts across particularly the Greater Banjul area and the West Coast region, where some of us live. We're not too happy. We'll hear about what NAWIC have to say about that. Undocumented migrants, they're being booted out, having been found without the right sort of papers. President Barrow has met folks from the medicines sector, particularly those importing medicines. Also, Gambia's Vice President went to Senegal on a 2-day visit, and he took a high-powered delegation. Colleague said I should say high-powered delegation. And also 6 suspects have been charged with various offences, burglary, stealing, and what have you. And Sierra Leone has taken control of the UN Security Council, in the sense they'll be chairing it for the month of August. These are some of the stories on tonight's program, so let's get kicking, shall we? First up, mentioned at the top of the program, intermittent power cuts. Those of us who live in the Greater Banjul area, last weekend it was horrendous. Long power cuts, and there had been some explanation, but it wasn't good enough for some of us, so we called them in for another bit of explaining. Here's a look, here's a listen.
We have the JAM project. We already have this modernization. So the contractor was ready with some of the jobs he was doing. And then all he needed was for us to shut down, and he requested for 8 hours, which we sent out there to the public to say yes. Saturday we're going up for 8 hours to allow the contractor to do those lines, last mile connection, do those jobs. And then everything started smoothly. It was going very fine. But unfortunately, the 7th hour, before the 8th hour, the contractor realized, and we all realized, that he cannot finish due to some technical reasons. So it drive down to the late evening. We were left with no choice but to abort. We stopped the jobs and then to continue the flowing day.
Mr. Mboj, we're smiling here because it's almost a week on from that, but at the time we were not smiling, were we? It was quite horrendous what we had to go through.
Absolutely, but I have to tell you this. Over the years, I mean, ever in my life, really, of course you will have your period where you'll have your supply. Yeah. I'm not sure, have we ever maintained it for 6 months or 1 year, stuff like that. So once in a while, this sort of thing always comes. So
and
psychologically,
we've been given some warning.
Yeah,
as we heard there, it didn't quite work out.
Absolutely. So psychologically, sort of, one was prepared for it, in the sense that this is really our life, as it were, ever since we haven't dealt with energy well. But here, with this specific case, saying that with the contractor requested 8 hours of shutdown.
That's right.
But when they got to the 7th, due to some technical issues, they had to abort. I was wondering, was there a case of poor planning? What was going on here? Yeah. And it seems it wasn't only that, because afterwards in our report, we talked about the technical issues of something like Brikama.
That's right.
And then how the rain is hampering certain work we do. In fact, one person there said 60% of the problem is because of rain. So putting all of this together, I'm wondering, are we getting the management right? I mean, after all, we are in the rainy season, and the rain has the right to come. We really cannot complain about the rain in August, if you know what I mean.
That's right.
So that must be part of my plan, really. So it was quite interesting.
I mean, the debate, as you can imagine, that raged on in the office, there were all sorts of views. For example, some were saying, why can't they do it in the hours when people are sleeping rather than awake? But some of it they have to do out in daylight, and they need the natural light to do it. So, that's out of the question. But of course, the fact that they do it in the kind of the waking hours means that people suffer, those who want to watch TV or virtually do anything. And of course, although we've been having some rainfall, there were several days when we didn't have any rain, and it was extremely hot. So your fans weren't working. So it really did have an impact. on just the daily lives of people, never mind those who were running businesses, who had, you know, big refrigerators or that sort of thing. Guess many of them, they would have kicked in for the with their generators. But I think the thing about poor planning, that kept coming up time and time again. As you mentioned, you talk about the 7th hour. I wonder whether it was at the 11th hour of the 7th hour, as it were, or the 59th minute of the 11th. You know, it did seem to indicate that there hadn't been proper planning, and you know, they tried to sort of go around on a kind of charm offensive and say to people, you know, we did try and warn people, but it ended up being worse than what we anticipated.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people will be willing to pay the price, you know, for a genuine upgrade. You know what I mean? But there's good management of it, and then we're given information that I will know how to plan. That's really what the issue is. But we know what our situation is, and we want to improve. If you're going to do that, there's a period of suffering you're going to go through, as it were. You can't sort of make an omelette unless you crack the eggs. Stuff like that. We all realize that. But again, if we are suffering, but because of poor management, then that would prolong the suffering.
And in fact, one of the reasons why we brought the piece that we've just taken the clip from and spoke to them was that they had issued a press release, which was on X, formerly Twitter, and on Facebook. Well, not everybody who was suffering was on Twitter or on Facebook. And so when I read it, I thought, maybe we need to speak to them about this, because unless you have those two social media platforms as part of your apps, then you're not aware that there'd been the warning, and there's also been the kind of, you know, apology, if you will, and which is why, and it shows that, you know, lack of communication. And I think planning includes communication. It's not just the physical work that you have to do, because you're impacting the public. You need to speak to the public and inform them.
Absolutely. If youth is really my target group, Facebook, absolutely fantastic platform.
Facebook, Twitter,
Twitter,
TikTok,
X, that sort of thing, isn't it? But again, you have a lot of folk here who really are not au fait, as they say, with these things. You know what I mean? So you're going to use different kinds of media. It's a plural, you see. You can use different sorts where, to reach different target groups. So they must really come with a good communication strategy in which you will talk to every segment, as it were, of your society using the appropriate platform. But one that is needed, and you know,
very much needed. And in fact, the other point I mentioned is you might even have those platforms, but if you don't have English as a language that you read in, then it's completely lost on you anyway.
And stuff like that. And one other thing, it was curious in the interview with Mr. Badger there about why light comes on, goes off again, on again, on, off. We're wondering. So he has answered it. Finally, I think I've got the answer. That sort of transformers we have, you know, that's why the system is unstable. He call it an instability issue.
That's right.
But with the new, what he called canopy transformers, so that will be
take care of it.
That will be a good thing.
And one that we should look forward to.
Bring it as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Now, on to another story. Story number 2, undocumented migrants. A lot of them have been rounded up, and some of them are being booted out of the country. Why? This will tell you. Have a look.
The immigration authorities are warning foreigners to regularize their status in the country.
Any individual who comes, before you will allow him either employment or to reside in your premises, you have to verify whether he has entered through a recognized entry point. That is one. Whether he has a valid passport or he has been controlled on number of days that he is supposed to stay.
Mr. Mboj, viewers, there are so many things that we could come at this one, but essentially I chose that bit because he's asking landlords to do the job of the immigration authorities, verify that the person has an ID, that they have a passport, that they've come through the right ports of entry or the right... look, they're not going to do that, are they? We have to be realistic. They just want your money. If you pay your rent, they don't care.
This sort of thing came up in England. Exactly similar policy. You know, putting this responsibility.
And in England, they fined the landlords if they were found not to have done those checks. Yes.
Absolutely.
I wonder whether they'll do that here, but yes, carry on.
Yes, they might. Yes, and you are right. in all likelihood, a good number of them will just ignore that. They just want the money.
Yeah, sure.
All we can do is really safeguard our borders.
Well, this is
and within, the thing is, you don't want the criminals to be around.
Yeah, quite.
That is really what the issue is. They call people smugglers and that sort of thing. They are all over the place. You really do not want them around.
Sure.
So apparently this time they've arrested 381, really,
right.
but just processed this 33.
That's right.
So, but for me, this is really what my point is. Without context, I really cannot evaluate the significance.
Well, this is it,
well.
and I'll tell you, because when I wanted to be a bit naughty, and so I just threw the question in the office when we were discussing the story, you know, after we'd all watched it, and I said, what do you think should happen to these people? And they all said, well, you know, if they're undocumented, they should be sent back. I said, but you were the same people who 4 weeks ago were saying that they shouldn't do that to Gambians who are in Europe. What's the difference? You know, undocumented here or undocumented somewhere else, they're undocumented. Why not let them stay? Like you're always telling me, you know, oh, they should let these Gambians stay even if they're undocumented or they've arrived there through, you know. But you see, we don't see it like that. And I asked the question, pretended that I was just innocently asking the question, you know, what should happen to them? And, you know, oh, you know, kick them out. Yeah, like, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but some of them have not committed crimes. They've just not regularized their stay.
Oh, absolutely. Don't they call that double think?
Well,
most of us really are not aware of how incoherent really our belief systems are in many ways. So this is the key. Undocumented.
But you're right, as you said, context is everything.
Context is everything.
You know, have they committed crimes, or is it just that when you rounded them up, they didn't have the right ID and so on? That's not necessarily a crime, really. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And is this sort of like a drop in the ocean? 381.
Yeah, quite.
You know, what is the scale of the problem? Do we have any idea? Has anybody done any studies on this? And yes, how does it sit with the ECOWAS? I'm sure somebody will start asking the question.
Absolutely.
How does this sit with the ECOWAS thing, single market, free movement, that idea of people.
Yes.
But quite clearly here, these people didn't use the right channels, the legitimate channels to come in. So I think we've all agreed that we should return them. For us, it's just a question of when and how much, which they haven't answered.
That's right.
This was a court ruling, wasn't it?
Well, it was.
Brikama Magistrates Court ruled that these people should be deported. It was a deportation order. So the when they're going to go and the how much it will cost.
I was interested to hear a challenge because they're claiming that they are Gambians. So, and they're giving them time to prove that they are Gambians. So it will be interesting to see what happens with those ones as well.
That's it. So that is really another angle right there. So yes, we'll see what happens there. But immigration, in the world right now, it's the sort of a tinderbox issue, isn't it?
Very much so, as we've seen, particularly in the UK right now.
Yes. And in this country, though, we've never had kind of the natives violently reacting, you know, causing trouble, sort of targeting a group because of nationality.
No, quite.
Not much. But again, one shouldn't be complacent at all. They must always manage it because few people are really very funny. We've seen South Africa, even Ghana, Nigeria. They have that thing going on sometimes. So one should be very watchful of that and control immigration.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that. Story number 3. His Excellency the President met people from the medicines sector, mainly importers and people selling medicines. And they had some challenges and they had some questions and some queries, all of which they put to His Excellency the President. Have a look.
These regulations, which include strict guidelines for the importation of medicines, were implemented following a deadly outbreak of acute kidney injury cases that led to the deaths of at least 70 children in the Gambia. This meeting with the head of state at the State House in Banjul discussed how the regulations are affecting the import and sale of medicines in the country while exploring solutions to overcome the challenges.
Our mandate is to make sure there is adequate supplies of pharmaceutical product into this country at affordable price. So if I am not able to import from a country that is considered to be a stringent regulatory authority, and I am not able to import from this country, it's a problem. Like, for instance, products that we import from Turkey, we all know that these are multinational products.
Now, he's raised a point there, and this is something that was a bit of a sticking point, because another pharmacy was saying that we import products from America, and you know, everybody knows this is a, you know, grade A country and so on, and yet the authorities were saying we don't care. The rules are the rules are the rules, and they apply to everybody from everywhere. And essentially, this is some of what they're complaining about.
Absolutely. I'm very careful with rules. Because of the AKI outrage, we were really outraged by that. Sometimes from there, you can make bad law.
You can
overreact. That's really
because we're not saying it was a bad, you know, but the reaction has been, you know, it's been beyond possibly what was needed.
I have to look at the situation and be realistic. They're telling you they're the importers. Then sooner or later you're going to have a shortage, which will. We all know the consequences on people out there. So I have to be realistic about how the market works. Yes, and I have realistic criteria in place, conditions. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Turkey, reasonably, you know, middle income coming up, and not bad. So have your monitoring that is sophisticated. I think that is really what the key is. Sophisticated monitoring system in place that, you know, you will know what to allow in and what not.
Well, that's
so
right.
having one rule, one line across the board, I'm not so sure. On the face of it, it might look like something fair to do, but when you look into the details, you realize that it is rather unsophisticated.
Yeah, quite. Because
that's really what the issue is.
This is it, and it is claimed that some of the importers had turned to Turkey because people were becoming suspicious of products that were coming from India because of the AKI deaths, which is not unreasonable, but as you rightly say. And I think what they're also complaining about is that the length of time it takes to do the checks and so on before they agree that, yes, this can come in. And that is kind of hampering this. And anybody watching this who's not Gambian, about 2 weeks ago somebody asked me about my impressions, having lived here for just over 5 years now. And one of the things I mentioned was, and I've mentioned this many times before, was the sheer number of pharmacies or chemists outlets that are here. They're more per head of population than any African country I can remember. So it's a big industry here in the Gambia. And of course that's why that delegation went to the president. They didn't just send a letter. They wanted to go and speak to him because, as they rightly said, they could be at a point where, you know, medicines that are needed are being you know, stopped from coming in because of delays and so on, and bureaucracy.
That's it. And I think you have that proliferation of these bodies, because really the state system cannot supply much.
Indeed. That's
so
right.
it's a demand and supply. And with these bodies, we will always keep on saying it, the punitive aspects, of course, you have to apply them, but you are also you should be a facilitative body, really. So you shouldn't be so, I don't know, pissed off about what happened to the extent that you will come with some cumbersome. That doesn't work in the kind of market we live in, any process that is cumbersome, you know, that's inefficient. You know, it's not going to work. So it doesn't work like that. Let us have a balance, certain equanimity, you know, of temperament. You're not angry. What happened. We just don't want it to happen again. But we want the market to flow as well. So there's a certain balancing out that one must do there instead of just applying the cane. You've got to know how to combine the cane and the carrot.
Indeed, the cane and the carrot. Let's hope they know how to apply. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And now on to a completely different story. Vice President B.S. Jallow was recently in Senegal, and he met with the Prime Minister there, and on the following day he met the President, but this report was after he met the Prime Minister. Have a look, have a listen.
Welcomed warmly in Dakar by Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, Vice President Mohamed B.S. Jallow's visit underscores the deep connections between the Gambia and Senegal. accompanied by top officials, including the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Fisheries, Defense and Water Resources. Jallo's agenda includes a pivotal working session with Prime Minister Sonko to discuss strengthening existing ties and identify new areas of collaboration. In addition to the meeting with the Prime Minister, the Vice President and his delegation are scheduled to confer with President Bassirou Diomaye Faye.
There you heard, I mentioned the Vice President, but also Defense, Fisheries and Water Resources ministers were all there. And of course we talk about deep ties, etc., etc. And there are always these warm words every time we go to Senegal or a Senegalese high official come here, but there's a kind of harsher, starker reality, isn't there, Mr. Mboj?
Wasn't it but a day after or so that we reported
and it's still ongoing as we speak, by the way, at the border,
yes.
Just beyond Farafenye. They are stopping Senegalese trucks from coming in, you know, just literally the day after the VP was in Senegal. And how ironic was that?
Right. So these are like snapshots of our relationship.
Yeah. The officials make all these
officials, absolutely
nice words. They sign all these protocols, and then down on the ground, Mr. and Mrs. Gambia and Monsieur and Madame Senegal have other views about, you know, how to interact with each other. In terms, another colleague was going, and she said that everybody, even the person who had the smallest bag on the bus going, had to come out, open the bag for inspection. And she said they thought they were doing this just to annoy them. But that's the kind of nonsense that goes on. And so they can make all these fine words, but there's as I said, there's a harsher reality about, you know, what happens on the ground.
That's absolutely it. Ever since I was younger, you know, when I was younger, the same story. Once in a while, something will flare up. Yeah, but it occurred to me that I can't remember a time when it had descended into violence. We were killing each other.
No, I mean,
it's never been to that level either.
I mean, there was an incident when our colleague Choi was going, and their bus was stoned, but you know, there were injuries. But as you're right, it didn't boil over, it didn't flare up to the extent where, you know, there was kind of, you know, fatalities or any serious, stuff not even any serious injuries on that particular case, really.
So you see, Eddie, we speak the same language. Somehow we work it out. So these things will come periodically. You see, the problem is people overreacting. We were saying this the other day. Maybe you're in Gambia, you've heard that perhaps there's some trouble in Senegal, Senegalese are attacking whatever, you don't even know the veracity of it, and then you start
you turn on Senegalese who are here.
That is really the danger, especially
danger.
the world we're living in now, with disinformation, misinformation, all the rest of it. So that's really what the danger is. But the fact that once in a while tensions will rise, that's human relationships. It would have been weird if we didn't have any tensions, as if we were not alive, the place was not dynamic. What do I expect from a dynamic system? I mean, once in a while, these things will occur. The problem is, the key is, how do you resolve your differences?
Crucial point.
That is really what the heart of the matter is. And so far, we've resolved our differences peacefully. Long may it last.
Indeed. Long may the entente continue to be cordial. Now, story number 5. Now, this one, there are lots of stories. If you go in the regular media, social media, you'll hear about people complaining about burglaries, about theft, about the rising crime. The police appear to be doing something about it, and they called us in to let us know. Have a look, have a listen.
Commissioner Mamadou Sow, Commander of the Anti-Crime Unit of the Gambia Police Force, explains.
You can see in the footages we recovered three brand new cutlasses that they use on their victims. The particular day they attacked this Burfoot Height, they stabbed a watchman who is still admitted at the hospital. And also similarly, when these people were arrested, because they were doing a lot of criminal activities within Sanchaba. Sanchaba, they affected 4 different compounds within the month of July, from 4th July to 24th of July. They also hit 4 different compounds.
There you had 6 suspects, 4 different compounds. Initially, when people heard, oh, it's only 6 people, but then when we spoke to the police, both in that report and subsequently, they said, well, you know, these people were they believe responsible for a series of the crimes, and they'd been given a tip-off rather, and were able to nab them.
Every nick is a good nick.
Absolutely.
Yes, now we are beginning to hear of sort of robberies, all over, people going around with arms and even stabbing and all the rest of it. That's really scary.
It
for
is
anybody.
scary.
You'll be scared.
Well, that's right.
So yes, you expect your police to step up.
Yeah.
You know, have the appropriate investigative methods in place, as it were.
Sure.
Tip off, good. You know, doing your stuff.
Brand new cutlasses,
Can you
looking kind of menacing, and a couple of older cutlasses that I said one of them was allegedly used to stab somebody in a robbery attempt. Also a fake gun that looked quite real was amongst what they, so they seem to be trying that, even if they haven't arrested 100 people, these 6 they claim are responsible for quite a number of crimes, and so they wanted to bring this to the public's attention, also to let the public know we're trying, and you also have a part to play, as in we, the public.
Oh, absolutely. But for me, yes, of course, you are trying. But it will be interesting to know how many cases in the year are reported. How many do you have suspects apprehended? Then how many do we prosecute?
Sure.
And what is the conviction rate?
That's what people
want to know. It will be absolutely fascinating to give us that context.
That's right.
Then we can really judge, evaluate how well you are doing. It's a whole chain of things, isn't it? So here you've given us 6 people, fantastic, and a good nick is a good nick is a good nick, as I said. But overall, how are you performing when it comes to crime? Because anecdotally, I wouldn't treat it as a science. Anecdotally, people tend to say, "Oh, crime is going up." There's a few stories will go around and amplifying the whole thing. But it will be interesting to keep our data. I'm not sure whether we keep data that would actually give us a realistic profile.
Well, this
of
is the thing I'm always banging on about when people say it is. But it would be good to get that.
Yes, put all of these things together, then you just say how well the police are doing. Otherwise, in the absence of that, you really cannot tell.
Yeah, quite. So, by the way, anybody wondering about the nick that he's talking about, in England, if you get arrested, you're nicked. And Mr. Mboji is saying any arrest or series of arrests, a good series of arrests. And now we will go for a quick break. And after this break, we will have 5 more stories. So don't go away. Join us after this break.
Welcome to the future of transportation in the Gambia. The Bertel Harding Highway, a 22-kilometer double carriageway, is set to revolutionize travel and connectivity in our beloved country. A 3-lane highway means more space for vehicles, smoother traffic flow, and reduced congestion. Each lane has a specific purpose. The leftmost lane for overtaking and faster vehicles, the middle lane for standard driving, and the rightmost lane for slower and turning vehicles.
Need a quick car service? Espas Motors has got you covered. From quick scans to oil changes and fuel filter replacements, we handle it all within an hour. Take advantage of our exclusive promotion with 35% off labor and 10% off service. Espas Motors is located at Bertel Harding Highway, opposite Kotu Power Station. Book now. Call 353-4444, 352-2222, 385-6822. Hurry, offer ends September 7th. Espas Motors.
Hello, after that break. Now you've had 5 stories, and you've missed 5 stories if you're joining us just now. But of course, as I always say, or always for those who are regulars, there are 5 cracking stories still to go, including the next one. Sierra Leone, my own country, they've taken over the presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of August. What's that all about? Let this tell you some of it. Have a listen.
As it assumes its month-long presidency of UN Security Council, Sierra Leone has unveiled an ambitious program aimed at addressing some of the most pressing global security issues. The highlight of the month is expected to be a pioneering discussion in enhancing Africa's role within the UN Security Council, alongside an open debate on the new agenda for peace. Sierra Leone was admitted as the UN's 100th member in September 1961. Taking on this leadership role, Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio, who also serves as the coordinator of the African Union Committee of 10 heads of state and government on the reform of the UN Security Council, is set to preside over an unprecedented debate on August 12, tackling the theme Maintenance of International Peace and Security, addressing historical injustice and enhancing Africa's representation. President Bio will emphasize the necessity for reform and the urgent need to rectify the long-standing exclusion of Africa from permanent membership.
There you heard Lena Ikwiniba. Mr. Mboch, as you and I know, UN Security Council, those of us who are from Africa, every time it gets mentioned, we usually have a lot of complaints. And now they've decided to have a kind of rotating presidency, and this time for the month of August it has fallen upon Sierra Leone, and as we heard there, they've set up an ambitious program, because that was it allows you to actually set the agenda for the month of which you have the presidency.
Oh, absolutely. But I have to tell you this. Then I thought, oh no, but still have the big five though. So I'm saying, is this just symbolism? What's the substance behind it? Well, yeah, we can set the agenda to debate, but we didn't need to any action. It depends on if the big five, they're okay with it.
Well, this is
contentious stuff.
Well, this is the crucial point, because also in that report, and the reason I included that bit in the report, there's a committee of 10 African Union countries that have been engaging with the UN about the reform of the the Security Council, to kind of take away the powers of the big five. You and I suspect it would never happen, but nonetheless that debate is ongoing, and that's one of the things that Sierra Leone will be bringing once again to the table, with President Bio of Sierra Leone representing the 10 from the African Union, who are saying that this institution, particularly the Security Council, needs reform, and it needs to have an African presence on a regular basis, not just an occasional one.
Absolutely. It's good to keep the pressure on.
Yeah,
absolutely. Keep it on the agenda, as it were. We constantly I'm talking about it all the time. But really, the big five, they're still in power around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't see them giving up their role, because we keep saying the big five, because now it is Russia, but previously it was the Soviet Union. And so when the Soviet Union dissolved, they gave that seat to Russia. I'm sure Ukraine are probably regretting that decision. But that's what it is. These big five are the big five around the world. Britain,
China,
United,
England, UK, France, USA. So you see how that institution will remain. They may disagree about all sorts of things, but still the Security Council is there, because they have the veto. So I'm not sure with these bodies whether merely pleading with them will give you a position in there. It's about economic and military power.
I was going to come to that, because I was going to make the suggestion or ask the question. With ECOWAS, when we saw the coup led 3 said it wasn't working for them, they withdrew. We have this group of 10. Do they dare say to the whole of Africa, if they don't bow to our demands, let's withdraw from the UN? I suspect not, but I will ask the question anyway.
Yes, that's absolutely it. So, in the end, it's good to keep the momentum going, but other things need to change.
Sure.
See, this is just one plank. You need so many different things as well. Other things need to change to change the Security Council.
That's right.
It's about power.
Thank you for that. So that was story number 6. Story number 7, child from the Gambia. They've just done something really rather wonderful. I won't spoil it for you. Let the report tell you. Have a look, have a listen.
The Zero Out of School Children project, which includes easing mobility for children, will be implemented by MOPSI, who will distribute the bicycles to schools across the country. Paul K. Mendy is a representative from MAPSI.
I think I appreciate the role of Child Fund in providing movement to facilitate children to go to school. By doing that, you are not only providing access, you are also contributing to quality. When a child reports school on time, without even sweating, riding on his or her bicycle, then he will prepare to receive lessons from teachers.
Mr. Mboj, 1,000 bicycles donated by Child Fund the Gambia. We could use another 10 or 20,000, but it's a start, and it's fantastic, particularly as it's been going to schools in areas where children are having to trek long distances to get to school.
So we want to enroll 66,000.
That's right.
And I said, you want to bribe them with
Yeah,
1,000
yes.
bikes? Bring at least 66,000 bikes.
Absolutely.
Oh, big time.
Absolutely.
I mean, come on, kids biking to school, that's like a part of the street furniture. Anywhere you go in the world, really.
Here, we need to make the roads safe, of course, as well.
But that was my fear.
Right, yeah.
Because I have a
12-year-old.
I have kids. I've thought about it. But when I look at the traffic, I'm scared. I cannot do that.
I know. I drive, and I have friends who said they will never drive here. But I don't think I would ever cycle here, just because of how reckless the driving is.
That's it. So I imagine that there are certain areas where there would be maybe bike friendly. Some areas would definitely be bike friendly, but others might not.
They have to take the risk.
You have to take the risk and stuff like that. But that's a good thing. You know, kids doing this and going to school is good. But that also makes sure that the whole infrastructure is friendly.
Well, this is it, because I was going to come to that, because if we give them the bikes, do we then also now need to have bike lanes, for example, that only for bicycles, and they can ride safely and comfortably along, aware that no vehicle is going to come into the bike lane, because there'll be barriers to stop that anyway. So really, that's what we need. But this, I certainly am applauding it, because it's a good initiative.
Then that's it. So you just hope that the safety aspects of it would be part of the package.
Exactly.
However they're going to do it.
It's not a case of here the bikes go and ride.
No, it has to be that. That's also part of their responsibility, really, since you're going to give them these bikes. So the safety aspects must always be emphasized.
Crucial one. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Now on to number 8 story. The Gambia. Of course, everybody knows the Gambia. If you don't live here and you live outside and somebody says the Gambia, you think, oh, that nice place where people go and get sun, sand, sea, etc. Have a look, have a listen about changes that we're trying to make.
And according to our terms of reference, we were to recommend 10 sites, which we did. And we had a validation exercise where we presented these 10 sites. And the second phase is to look at an in-depth analysis and all the things that surrounds these sites, these 10 sites, and come up with our recommendations for these sites in terms of cost, what is required in terms of infrastructure that is required, in terms of how government can engage the private sector, how they can engage communities, so that, and of course investors, so that these sites will be alive and working for the development of tourism in this country.
There we heard Adam Abba, who's been in the industry for quite a while. I've met him a few times, somebody I have great respect for. Mr. Mboj, what he's talking about there, it's about diversification of the tourist offer, as they put it. Sun, sand, sea, and so on has been the thing for many, many years. And it's becoming a bit tired, a bit cliched now. What else do you do? He mentioned 10 sites. We didn't mention all the 10 sites, but there were pictures of some of them that they said, could do with more people being visited. But again, those sites need to be improved, brought up to a certain standard before you get people coming to watch them.
That's it.
So that's one aspect of it.
Yeah, so with that study, they'll go into that, and the funding bit. I was particularly looking for the funding bit. Who's going to fund it? It's going to come from the government, the coffers, the public coffers. Right. Or, as he said, they're going to get private sector to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Would this sort of move the needle? Imagine we sort of rehabilitated them all and then the rest of it. How would it move the needle? Is this about heritage tourism, as they call it now?
Well, I was going to say, because I mean, for some of the sites, when I was looking at that, and I'm sure they've considered this, you could have UNESCO funding. So again, sorry for mentioning Cabo Verde, but you go to Cidade Velha, which just means old city. It's the oldest European-built city in the tropics, and it's in Cape Verde. And they got money from UNESCO to develop it. It's now hugely popular with tourists because it has that unique historical significance. So it's not just people, as you said, heritage tourism. It's kind of world heritage tourism, really. And there are sites in the Gambia that could potentially, some of these former slave ports, of course, and so on, which could benefit from that. So as I said, I'm assuming they've considered those, because it's not going to come from government or possibly even the private sector.
That's it. The funding, that's one aspect. But again, and the most surveys you see, they've done a few, particularly in Britain. Most of the tourists that come here are really British, aren't they? The major segment. Why do you come to Gambia? And it's really the same old sun, sea, sand, whatever, and the other S.
Exactly.
So what is the strategy
to appeal
to attract people who would want that sort of thing, heritage tourism? Because when you look at the number that come for that, they're very, very minimal, they're small.
Well, that's right.
Really. So what is the strategy for that?
Yeah, quite.
So it's not as simple as saying that once we rehabilitate these areas, then the numbers will follow.
Sure.
I am not sure if that is true.
Yes, I mean, and again, and I promised myself I wasn't going to mention Cape Verde, but in Cape Verde you have 9 islands that are inhabited, and it's so distinctly different. And the offer they have includes, for example, if you went to the island of Sant'Antao, hiking, and they have now tens of thousands of people from Europe who love hiking, because when you get to the top of Pico de Paul, you can look down on the clouds. I've done it. And you don't have anything like that here in the Gambia. It's flat. Everywhere is flat. But there, the terrain is so different. You could sell each of those 9 islands on a different package, because you get a different experience in all of them. And they're far enough apart that you can't just go from one to the other. So, and that's what they've done. But we don't have that. And you're rightly saying that, just because you think, okay, how do you then attract people to say this is what we have? Because many of them, they work hard and they want to come and play hard, and part of that is kind of relaxing somewhere where they just sit in and get roasted by the sun in a way that they're not going to get. I mean, in all my younger days in England, it was many, many years before I ever went to a beach there. Here, there are beaches all around, and that's what people come for.
Absolutely, and we live in the area, tourism development area around the Kuru, Senegambia area. Most of them, you meet them, they're really not interested in your heritage.
Yeah,
to be quite blunt, they're just here for the fun.
Well, this is but the point I was going to make about that is that in the same way that Roots appealed to the kind of African American audience, we suddenly said, oh, so we're not from Zululand, we're from West Africa. Let's go and check out this West Africa. Those are the kind of people who, for them, that is still, like this kind of the upsurge in, for example, DNA tourism, where people say, oh, I've done my DNA and it says I come from here. I want to go and see what that place is like. Some of them, when they do their DNA, it will place them in this sub-region, and you could appeal to them on that basis.
That should have been our natural market,
quite.
African-American market, because of this
such a huge
line. But again, we've not been able to come with anything imaginative, anything that can work, that can attract them.
Sure.
That would have been interesting for this heritage thing we're talking about.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, well, we'll see what happens. But when you look at certain key indicators, I am not sure whether the reconstruction of these sites would necessarily move the needle.
So that brings me back then with the sun, sea and sand one. Is it that you need to improve the infrastructure that you have here, have some 4-star, 5-star hotels, and that becomes a selling point?
The erosion that's going on, how do you deal with that? So yes, that is the area possibly I will focus on really, and make it upmarket for the sort of people who want to come here. That's your comparative advantage in many ways. It has never been anything else. Really, it was based on this. So there's nothing wrong with trying to reinvent
and improve
yourself,
yeah, quite.
But it's really an extremely difficult job.
Yeah, quite.
You know,
the competition
they're thinking that just by reconstructing these parts, then the numbers would necessarily come. I said, nope, not necessarily. All the things must go right as well.
Quite. Thank you. And just to depress everybody, 20 years ago, Gambia used to get more tourists than Cape Verde. And in 2019, Cape Verde registered 890,000 tourists. Let that sink in. Thank you, Mr. Mboch. Takes us to our penultimate story, story number 9, Core Africa. They had this really interesting day. It was called a pitch day for volunteers. What's that all about? Have a look and find out.
The event comes after 7 months of integration and working in communities to identify in sectors of greatest need for the implementation of small-scale solutions to build resilience in the communities. The Pitch Day provides these 11 volunteers with the opportunity to showcase their projects, which addresses critical needs for community development. Fode Bojang, Core Africa's country director, shared insights on the organization's mission.
Core Africa tries to implement small, impactful projects. We don't implement big projects because we want the project to be sustainable in the sense that we allow the communities to contribute their quota in terms of implemented by countries from cash and labor and the like.
You know, Core Africa, I particularly love this story because you spend 7 months with the community and then you come up with a project and you don't just go and say, come and fund me. You actually have to pitch like you would for an entrepreneurial business. We did the Kerjula Challenge here on QTV, which was GCCI's one. And this is kind of similar, except it's for developmental projects that really something that the community wants and needs.
That's it. And their contribution as well.
That
sense of
you don't
ownership.
just throw the money at
you
it.
don't just throw it at them. They have to contribute to it.
Right.
You know.
And it could be physical, it could be their manpower,
Absolutely.
it could be whatever.
Shared ownership.
A
fantastic idea.
I
think we should have lots of.
Like I said, we're not working for Core Africa here, but I have to say I did some more digging and I see what they're doing in other countries, and I absolutely love the idea. I love the model that they're doing here, and as Mr. Mboch rightly says, there's a kind of shared ownership. You feel a sense of ownership when you contribute to this. It's not just somebody saying, oh, you need a clinic, you need this, I'll come and build it for you. It's not like that.
And it shouldn't be like that at all. That kind of patronage.
Right.
It's really not good for my sense of ID, sense of myself. So fantastic that they're including people in it. And yes, it's productive. We should have lots of these things. In fact, you do have lots of studies telling you that projects that have been impactful, sort of in terms of reducing poverty and the like, have been really projects direct towards SMEs.
Right, yes,
small businesses.
That's right.
Really, they're the ones that tend to make a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely.
Well, governments were like the big ones, but actually, they tell you that, according to our studies, the ones that really have an impact on people, ordinary people, are really the small SMEs,
and
not
in
the
fact,
big ones.
we were talking in another context about data and statistics. In fact, if anybody walked out from here or anywhere else, just look at the number of small businesses that you'll come across. And that will tell you everything, that there's many more of them than there are of bigger businesses.
Absolutely, and you make a difference in their lives.
That's right.
Really, instead of all these big ones.
Quite. Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you for that. That takes us on to our final story, story number 10. And we go back here to West Africa and particularly to Mali, where they've decided to cut ties with Ukraine. Why have they done that? Hey, listen and find out.
In a televised statement on Sunday, government spokesperson Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga said the transitional government of the Republic of Mali condemns the hostility of the authorities of Ukraine, who do not observe that Mali has always called for a peaceful settlement of the crisis between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Following the incident in July, Andrei Yushov, a representative of Ukraine's security service, is said to have revealed previously on Ukrainian television that Kyiv had indeed provided the militants with intelligence for the attack. He is quoted as saying that the rebels received necessary information which enabled a successful military operation against Russian war criminals.
We heard there, there's been a kind of obsession, love affair growing with Russia in Africa as we speak. Protesters in Nigeria had been waving the Russian flag and now faced being arrested and jailed if they do so. And just before we came on air, I heard that Niger have kicked out Swedish ambassador because the ambassador said, I don't like the way that this country is growing closer with Russia. So Russia seemed to be the colonizers that we're inviting in, Mr. Mboj, and then we're kicking out anybody. But we never thought the war in Russia would come to us, even as those in our sub-region embraced the Russians.
Absolutely.
The Russia-Ukraine war.
Because my immediate impression was, my immediate response was, I thought these guys were busy in fighting the Russians. Then, of course, the elements, they were fighting the Russians.
But
That's
not
in there, but over here, the Wagner group. Yes, this is a curious one there.
It's a really odd one.
I just do not know what to say. Okay, fine, you break diplomatic relations, fine,
Ukraine would care less.
And then what?
Yeah, of course.
It's a complex area because Ukraine can tell you that, look, what we did wasn't against Mali, it was against Russia. Stuff like that. It's just that now in our world things are so intertwined in many areas. There are so many overlaps given the world that we are in now. So I do not know, is it a good thing to kick them out? Well, yes, I suppose so. So what's going to be the end game? And then what?
And would we see more, in quotes, Ukrainian interventions in the other countries that have invited in Wagner? I think that will now be the thoughts and the danger that African countries will be thinking, hang on a minute, these people are bringing their war to our doorstep. You know, there's people who get killed here, but, you know, they're how many tens of thousands of kilometers away.
But this is the reality of the world we're living in. You've invited in the enemy, in their eyes, they're the enemy. So if they think that they should strike certain areas, certain points, they'll probably do it because you're necessarily implicated in it, whether you like it or not. These two are like enemy combatants, if you like. You're siding with one. Well, what do you expect? So with us, we're not going to have easy solutions. We don't want the West. Granted, let them leave. But now where are we going?
Well, that's right.
That's it. We're going to another master. It seems we cannot do without masters, as it were. Now the master is really the Kremlin or Beijing.
That's right.
So we've acquired new masters now. But they're not going to be easy solutions. Things happen, so deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it because it opens up a whole different front that none of us would have considered 2-3 months ago, even, really.
Exactly. Who would have thought
that Russia-Ukraine war would come to our doorstep in this manner?
But look at it, it has. So you have these unforeseeables. As it were, in any situation, there are certain unforeseeables. So, wasn't it, who was it? Harold Wilson? Or was it Macmillan?
Macmillan, probably.
Yes. What moves history, the most difficult part of a job. Said events there, boy, events. You just never know where they were going to come out of, where they would pop out of. So, the mark of a brilliant leader is how to adapt. How to absorb what you need to absorb and take the right decisions, sound decisions. It's not very easy, Warik.
It's definitely not easy. Uneasy lies the head, etc. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And that brings us beautifully to the end of this week's program. And until we come your way again next week, just leaves for me to say thank you, Mr. Mboj, for your interventions and your interjections, and to Lamin D. Sonko for the signing, and of course to you, the viewer, for listening and watching. Until we come your way again next week. Goodbye.